Welcome. So my name is Logan Rathbone, and I'm Family Law Committee co-chair here with FOLA. So this is, again, as I indicated, our second breakout session for this afternoon that follows our AI theme for our our spring, getting ahead of myself, our spring 2024 plenary. And I'd like to introduce our two distinguished speakers for this session. We have Colin Lachance, founder, PGYA Consulting, and Art Wilson, the manager, Access to Innovation, A2I, LSO. And the title of this session is AI as a Threat, a Competitor, and a Promise. And our two distinguished speakers have made the ill-advised, in my opinion, decision to allow me to sit here by them and interject anytime I want. So we'll see how that goes. All right, you guys want to make a start?
Sure. You want to go or you want me to go?
I'll go.
Okay.
I'll jump in at the beginning here. So thank you to this packed room for your rapt attention. This is a fun topic. There's a saying that people have thrown around in various iterations for a while that AI won't replace lawyers, but lawyers who use AI will replace lawyers who don't. I think increasingly people are coming around to the idea that AI will replace some lawyers. AI will replace the need for some lawyers. AI will change the nature of problem solving because it can change the way we interact with the things in front of us. We can try and do things in ways that we couldn't before. So I don't think it's as simple as saying that AI will or will not impact lawyers' professional opportunities. I think it's a question of how and who, and the answers to that really come down to how the individual lawyers themselves react. So that's my opening.
Yeah. I'm going to take a slightly different position on that. I don't think it's going to replace lawyers. I think when you mention that there are legal needs out there that are not currently being met by lawyers and may never be met by lawyers. There was a study by the Canadian Forum on Civil Justice. If you hear people throwing around a number like 80% of legal needs not being met, it often comes from this study. And it was talking about how roughly 80% of people's what they called everyday legal needs, and these were adversarial type legal needs, were often not being met by the profession. But it also made the point that a good number of these really almost weren't appropriate to be met by the profession. They were sort of minor enough. I mean, I sometimes think if I go into my home and throw a light switch and a light doesn't come on, well, I've got an electrical problem. It may just be a light bulb, but I've got an electrical problem. I don't need a lawyer for that. And one of the study also identified is one of the barriers that these unrepresented people faced was a lack of capability, legal capability. And so where I think the generative AI has the potential, it's not there yet, the products aren't there yet, where it has the potential is to help give these people the legal capability. So I think it's going to largely benefit people who were not engaging with lawyers in the first place. It may actually tell some of them, hey, I'd help them identify that, I really do need a lawyer here, and it can actually drive some business of the profession. The other side of it, though, and I'm just going to trip over to the promise side for a moment, is that if you think about, if as a lawyer, when you're starting to incorporate generative AI into some of your work, it lets you work more efficiently and therefore deliver better value to your clients, then there may be a portion of the population out there for whom their legal problem before, your service model didn't represent a good value proposition. Now you're delivering a better value proposition. There's going to be a greater portion of the population with legal problems who may turn to a lawyer because they can now get a better value from a lawyer.
I could just jump in and ask one thing there. So one of my personal experiences as counsel, and especially dealing with self-represented individuals, is that this lack of ability is often coupled with an overconfidence in thinking that they know a lot or thinking that they know more than they do. So is there also the possibility that AI could kind of amplify this problem?
Very, very much so. There was an interesting interview, I'm going to find my note here, that was Ezra Klein having an interview with Dario Emoto, who was one of the head guys at OpenAI, I think, for a while. And one of they identified as one of the problems with generative AI, and as they put it, is it's a really good liar and it's a fantastic bullshitter. Because it said, like with human beings, you can usually you can have a bit of a sense when they're lying, or like their grammar is bad or they're off. But OpenAI or other generative AI tools will very confidently tell you something that just simply is not based in fact at all, but leads you to believe it. So there is a real risk there that people will have very confident answers that they will then waltz into court or waltz into their lawyer's office, as one of our previous panelists was commenting, and be troublesome. I mean, I think an ill-informed self-rep litigant is probably much more dangerous than an uninformed one.
So it's a good question, and I like the answer that Art gave. I want to come at it from a slightly different angle. We have a long history of people trying to figure out their own legal pieces and then lawyers having to clean up the mess after they figure it out incorrectly. Whether for corporate work, the state work, divorce, what have you, like wills. I remember when I articled in the late 90s, and the principal of our firm was on the local news saying, well, people have these will kits. They may think they've accomplished something when they've really accomplished nothing. So to one extent, this idea of people overshooting their DIY capabilities has been around, and it will continue to be around. And you don't necessarily see it sort of spreading out and impacting everything, because there are other parts of the legal system that prevent that from happening. So if I file something that's just complete garbage, there's a good chance it's going to get stopped before it gets dealt with. If I show up in court with a big stack of papers, the judge or the commissioner or whomever might say, well, hang on, this is not what this hearing's about. This hearing is about just like X. That's the only thing we're here talking about. So we have this kind of experience right now. AI isn't necessarily going to be the cause of making it a larger problem. But what I think AI will do is it will put stress on the models, on sort of the safeguards that have held the system together. So I can like go on YouTube and say, here's what I think the law is, and that's great, and 5 people might watch it. Or I can start using AI and other technological tools, and I can push out millions of emails. I can flood, a variety of businesses or potential defendants and so on. And I'm going to create a stress in the problem that's going to have a reaction not to AI, but to what I've done to the system. So I think the AI impact is going to be multifaceted. It's not as simple as there's a particular tool that does something good or bad, because there's a lot of tools that do a lot of really good things. It's that we have to rethink a lot of how we're going to carry out what we consider to be the practice of law, how the system carries out what it considers to be the administration of justice. One of my favorite analogies here is that we're bringing rain or snow to an environment that didn't have to deal with it before. And that's where I think a lot of the impacts are going to come. We don't know what they are yet.
So where does that take us at this stage?
Where it takes you is if you see a weather report and you see rain and snow is coming and you don't know what it is, it behooves you to figure it out. If you're a guardian of the system, you should be thinking about how you start to prepare for this. So we're seeing a little bit of that right now from the courts, saying, well, here's a practice directive. If you use AI in this particular way, you have to tell us. Well, that's nice, but it's a small thing. But that's the kind of example. But it's going to have to be larger than that. So the Access to Innovation work of the Law Society is another example. It's not about AI, it's about a wide range of pressures on the system that require different release valves. And so I think if you are a guardian of the system or somebody who does work in that environment, that's how you have to think about it. If you are an individual barrister or solicitor, you have to think about it as well. It's like, how can you do your job differently? How will the environment in which you practice change? And who's going to be on the other side of a file from you?
Well, and you've spoken about, and gotten into some tangents from there. But you've spoken about potential threat, or whether it is or is not a threat, of AI to lawyers that use versus don't use AI. But what about, in our previous session, our speakers got into this a little bit. What about as a threat to, junior counsel or law clerk jobs, things like that?
If I could just jump in on that one, and then Colin, I'm sure will have something to say. This came up. It was actually in an internal meeting I had at the Law Society, and this was brought up as a concern. And something came to me that hadn't really occurred to me before. So let's say you think you're in a Bay State firm and you're an articling student, you're a junior lawyer, and you're there at 11 o'clock at night sifting through boxes of documents to find the assignment clauses and contracts and things. And are you really doing that in some way that it trains you to be a good corporate lawyer, or are you simply doing that because you're a low person on the totem pole and you have to do the real grunt work? Another speaker I saw at a conference said, you don't need two law degrees and to be able to, sift through documents. So it may be. I'm starting to think that we could take some of the work that generative AI could do. We could take that off the platter of a junior lawyer or an articling student and not impact their ability to be on the job, trained to be a good lawyer. Of course, there is still the risk of, okay, now what do we do with them when we freed up all this extra time? And maybe it's just the next level of grunt plus one job will now be to them.
Right. Those are good points, and I think a couple other things are there's a competency side of this, then there's a business side of this. The business side is like the leverage model of some larger law firms. There's an assumption that you have the students come in, you pay them a little bit, build them out at a reasonably high rate, you do okay, and then some of them eventually grow up to be your partners. On the competency side, the failure doesn't begin in the firm, the failure begins at law school. So if AI is going to have an impact on the ability of a lawyer to develop the competency to serve the public in a manner that is required by the public or the client, that we have to start really thinking about how we train them from the beginning. So if you're not already following Jordan Furlong on his Substack, please do. I don't know anybody who's spending as much time publicly thinking and talking about lawyer formation and competence as it relates to AI as Jordan. And if you want to follow just the topic more broadly, there's a guy named Ethan Malik, professor in the U.S., professor on entrepreneurship and ideation and a variety of things in business schools. And he's been one of the most visible public intellectuals on AI, and he's really, really deep into this idea of saying, like, wow, we have to figure out how to let people bring AI along as what he calls a co-intelligence. It's not us versus them, it's there. It's like an alien intelligence, he describes it, that's there to help us. And so that's a different kind of learning. And so if we can start impacting that learning at the law school level, it becomes less of a problem at the law firm and business level, because you've trained somebody to become more effective at how they approach problem solving, and how they approach large volumes of information, how they can critically evaluate what's right, wrong, or needs deeper attention. If you're waiting to say, well, do I use tool X because it cuts billable time off? The other panel, I love that line, partners saying, we want to give the associates spoons, not shovels, to do their jobs. That's fantastic. But that's like a narrow scope business view. It's not sort of a broader view of what we do. I think there's a ton of promise, but in terms of like development, there's what's lost pales in comparison to what's to be gained by figuring out how to make use of these kinds of technologies.
Yeah. And one other thing I would just add is, when you think about, what's it going to do to your practice? Take a look at, what were all your billable hours last year, and how many of those hours did you have to write off because a client came and said, I'm not paying 4 hours for that. And so in some ways, when you have things that can make us more efficient in our practice, when it just makes our value model more acceptable to the client. And so your billable hours will end up becoming, more of them will become your actual billed hours. Yeah. And you won't have all those time where you're like, I was here till 11 o'clock. and I didn't get paid for 4 hours of it. So deliver better value, your client's going to be more satisfied and willing to pay the bill.
Yeah.
God, we're going down a rabbit hole.
No,
here.
it's important, but like one of the large downtown firms here shared with me their view of Alexi, the tool that was discussed by the Western Slot gentleman earlier. Their view was it's great for training junior lawyers because it focuses the junior lawyer on the task of evaluating the suggested cases that are relevant to the issue, rather than the 3 or 4 hours they spend trying to figure out which cases are relevant to the issue. So it allowed them to sharpen a better skill, a higher value skill. So you get the memo, bill the client, as you say, like you can create stuff that you can now bill the client for. You're not writing off the 3 hours the student spent trying to figure things out. You've billed the client your disbursement for getting this AI memo, and you billed the client for the hour or two that the person said spent validating, yet this is right, and here's how we would twist what we found in those cases to make the argument. AI that doesn't have the answers, but it has the foundation that can get you to the argument you want to make more quickly.
One other thing I'd add is if you think about, at least back to the time, I'm going to date myself here. When I was first articling, you were primarily like paper versions of the Canadian abridgment, and there was on there was quick law and stuff. But if you actually tried to start your legal research with quick law, no way. Like over time, it's developed so that you can go on to an online legal and start your research right there. I think one of the things with generative AI is it's come on in such a flash. Like if we took back to 1991 when I was articling, with the level that legal tech was then, and then all of a sudden leapfrog ahead to 2015, we would have looked and gone, oh my God, what are we going to do with articling students? Research is just going to be so full, we'll have nothing to do with them, right? And yet we do. We found something to do with them. We found something to do with young associates. Now, granted, it was a little easier because it came on in a trickle rather than a flash, but I think we will find things.
I think that, so this is a three-pronged session, right? So AI as a threat, competitor, and a promise. I think when you two started the dialogue here, a lot was discussed about the potential, not necessarily threat, but perceived threat of AI. And I think we've segued into some of the promises of AI. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah.
So I guess that takes us to, and there's probably some overlap here between threat and as a competitor. But, one might ask, okay, so if AI is a potential competitor, a competitor to what?
And that, I can maybe touch on that first, because in the Access to Innovation program, we're looking at, legal services delivered through technology, and primarily, almost entirely so far, we're looking at direct-to-consumer legal tech. And we've started to receive some applications that are sort of like legal chatbots and things. And we're literally looking at it as a challenge because, and it's a challenge, and we're struggling with it, I'll admit, because, when you look at generative AI tools for lawyers, we can have all these guidance from the law societies, and we can have simple statements like trust but verify. So you'll draw on your training and your knowledge, right? We can't do trust but verify with non-lawyers. And the other challenge is, pre-generative AI, a computer program was either going to be right 100% of the time or it was going to be wrong 100% of the time. Like if I enter a very complex data into a calculator and I do it 10 times and I don't make a mistake, I'm going to get the same answer 10 times. Generative AI is different. It is, because it is generating, it will generate different answers every time. They may be substantively identical. So one thing that we're struggling with a little bit and we're looking into is, okay, since we can't say, 100% right or wrong, how accurate is going to be good enough? And do we have to look at substantive accuracy, or is there collateral stuff? And is it level of accuracy? Is it risk of damage? And so I'll admit, it's something that we're still really working, and that's one of the reasons we haven't approved anyone yet. We're still taking a little more time on these just to figure out, what do they look like. One other thing I'll add, most of the ones, not the ones I've evaluated yet, anything I've seen out there so far, with one exception, it's generally been pretty crappy. And people keep pointing them out. Hey, do you see this one where New York City was telling landlords they could kick their their tenants out, and restaurant owners, they could take the tips? There is one in now called Beagle Plus, which a BC called the People's Law School, which is a little bit like Clio, has out. And it actually is pretty good. But it's pretty good in sort of hand-holding people and leading them through and helping them know, what do I have to do? So in the same way that Clio tries to do without the same sort of a chatbot. So it's useful there in telling people what do they need to do, what are the steps they have to do. It's not taking them, they still have to do it. And for some of it, they're still going to need a lawyer to do it. But there I am seeing one that's showing promise, and perhaps because it's not trying to do too much. It's not trying to deliver the world.
Colin, thoughts on AI as a competitor?
Yeah, I think the competition is going to come from multiple angles. So there's the component where the tool is direct to the consumer for purposes of helping them diagnose, for purposes of helping them take preliminary actions. That creates a bypass from people who may, like a small number of people who may have entered the stream of hiring a lawyer. A larger area of bypass is going to be corporate legal departments, larger corporate clients generally. So just to give you some context on this, for most of from late 2021 through to end of 2023, I worked daily with a postdoc, PhD, NLP expert, explainable AI expert we were building stuff. And one of the things we built a little over a year ago, just to see if we could do it, was a tool that was going to be directed towards in-house counsel to do a preliminary diagnosis of a legal issue. So if you're in-house counsel, here's your day. I'm expert at one thing, I'm the generalist on everything else that the company needs to do. When something comes out of my area of expertise, I triage it, and we did a ton of research interviews and so on. The general approach that corporate counsel would take was, I check Google to see if there's something that's a useful answer. If there's nothing on Google, maybe I check a couple of law firm websites to see if they blogged about it. What I don't do is I don't go to Canley or Westlaw to try and research it. At that point, I pitch it over to the law firm for an opinion. Tell me what I should do about this. We built a tool that said, well, what if we could give you a series of questions, based on this, or I give you a series of actions or a way to evaluate it, not so you could create a legal argument, but so we could help you as corporate counsel turn that legal issue into a business issue. So we built a tool that allowed somebody to say, in the form of a voicemail or an email, blah, 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 here's a bunch of stuff that happened. So step one of the AI was to diagnose the paragraph and say, well, based on what you said here are 4 things that look like legal issues. Which ones do you care about? Click, click. Okay. Separately, we've taken a body of case law and analyzed it, broken them down by issues within those cases. So now we match the issues that these people have identified to issues as they appeared in cases. It's okay, well, here are 5 cases that seem to be lined up with it, and here are some parallel issues found in those same cases. Which of these cases do you think are relevant? This one and this one. Click, click. So right now, they're 30 seconds into engagement with this tool. They haven't read anything other than really short stuff. And then we say, click a button and we'll generate a quick little memo for you. And the memo doesn't answer your legal question. The memo says, well, based on this, here's a couple things you're going to want to consider, and here's some risk areas, and so on. Essentially, what you might expect for the first $1,000 of the retainer from your outside counsel. Now, we didn't come up with this idea. There's a company in the US called Casetext that launched that a month earlier using OpenAI's GPT-4. And then 3 months later, Thomson Reuters bought that company for $650 million US. And Thomson Reuters, of course, has now loaded that into Westlaw in Canada. So you have an AI competitor
to outside counsel.
The inside counsel is now using this far more advanced tool than the one that we threw together to decide whether to send you questions or to say, oh, it's this? Well, you know what? I can solve that myself for $3,000. I'm not going to send it out. So this is the real way I think AI becomes a serious competitor to lawyers, is that a lot of the work that would have come to you is not necessarily going to come to you because the people who would have come to you with the questions are going to triage their stuff. And sometimes, as Pula was saying, they might show up with ideas for you. Other times they might show up with, you know what, this is the only part I need you to worry about because I've taken care of the rest, or I've decided it's not worth fighting over, and so on. So that's the nature of the competition. It's a bypass.
But one thing one thing, of course, I add to that, though, is with the firms also having these tools.
Absolutely.
That what used to be the $1,000 opinion, maybe the $250
Yeah.
opinion, and you still get asked.
Absolutely. So everything sort of like circles back to what I said. Like this isn't like a bunch of like little problems that are happening. This is a weather system that's moving into the environment in which we operate. And so we have to think how it impacts us, how it impacts others, and both the people that come to us and the people that we go to in order to move things through. So there's a lot of acting and reacting.
Well, no, excellent points. We have time, but we're running close to the point where we have 10 minutes left. I don't think that we need to reserve a full 10 minutes for questions, but
That's a pretty big crowd.
I would invite both of you to provide some final thoughts, I suppose, on anything that you'd like to add to what you've just discussed thus far.
Super short, learn. Just go out and figure things out. That's my final thought.
Yeah. And the one thing I would add is, if you look back when what the last big shocker to the legal profession was, which was the cloud, and it really came out about 2008, 2010, and 5 years later we were still, I don't know, cloud. That looks pretty scary. Whereas GPT 3.5 is 18 months old. And you've got a lot of people go, whoa, better get on the train now or you're going to miss it. You could, a year from now, I might be saying better get on the train or you're going to miss it. But it's 18 months. If you're not comfortable, yes, learn. But if you want to take time to learn and watch and get a little more knowledgeable before you jump in, the train, you're not going to miss the train. You might be a few cars back. But you can walk through up to the club car and have a drink, and
I'd say personally, as you'd never know it by looking at me, but as somebody who's been interested in technology for pretty much my whole life, I've seen fads and hyperbole come and go. But I think that when it comes to what we've seen, GPT 3.5 was really a watershed moment.
No doubt. But I'd also say that I've been working with legal tech for 10 plus years. And every single piece of legal technology that was demoed to me in a firm and then we went out and tried out, invariably overpromised, underdelivered. And Jordan Furlong, he may have changed now, but I think around January was predicting that we were going to have a bit of a generative AI hangover in 2024 where people were like, well, what is this magical thing? And it's like, okay, it actually helps me, but it's not. And I can take my factum and rewrite it in Shakespearean English, and isn't that funny? But it's undeniably going to be a very useful tool. But it's okay to watch and wait if you're not comfortable with it. I think the people who are saying get on now or you're gone, that's move at your own pace.
I think that initial feeling that so many of us had, like, oh my God, this is so incredible, they're so blown away, has dissipated a little bit when they've seen some of the limitations. But I think that as well, people are looking ahead to, say, the next 12, 24 months and thinking, if we got here just with the snap of a finger, what's the evolution? What's the promise going to be?
Yeah, and it's super, and undeniable. Like, I use it all the time. I don't use it in legal research much. But I use it all the time. People are like, what the hell is an answer? And I use Gemini now more. But early on, when I was first working with the Law Society, people wanted me to start talking about this. I did an experiment. It probably couldn't be. We were probably getting near Thanksgiving or something. So I did a search on Google of how do you roast a turkey, and I think I got 600,000 hits. And I did one on Bing, and I got 400,000 hits. And then I asked ChatGPT, and I got an answer. And it wouldn't have been bad. The breast meat would have been a little bit dry, but overall, it was, okay, this is how I roast a turkey. In a way, I was thinking, the bigger threat to this is to basic search engines, because it actually doesn't give you hits, it gives you answers. And that can be very useful. I mean, somebody on, I think, one of the previous panels, I think it was you, sir, were mentioning, like when you had to go in and look or maybe it was a gentleman from Leinster Slatter, like I need to like cross-reference and what does this image look like? And so doing some like when you just need to fish and get a quick answer to something, it's super helpful in that way. That's undeniably so.
Thank you very much for your very insightful discussion. Gentlemen, we have about 5 minutes for questions. If anybody has a question, just stick your hand up, wave it around like crazy. And
I missed the earlier session because I was upstairs with a different panel. But like I'm generally pretty pro AI, and I would tell you I've got the ChatGPT account. I've tried out the Copilot, which is Microsoft's. I think Gemini is the Google one.
Yep.
But like, I do have the hangover, right? Like I went into it, I was like, okay, this is exciting. I want to go full bore. I'm still paying a couple of bucks to beta some LawDroid program from the US, which doesn't have anything that's Ontario based, really helpful for me. But you know, when I look at it and I'm like, what can I actually use it to do? And you know, I'm a solo. I have a whole bunch of firm memos for my clients that provide like base opinions on the litigation process, costs, all these other sort of things. And so when they sign up with me, they get like a little booklet, which I tell them, you know, I have homework assignments now. It'll be really riveting in the evening if you want to go to sleep. But you know, one of the things that I've been able to do with it is I redid the entire booklet, right? Because I had written it. And I write like a lawyer. and so I put in instructions like, I want this rewritten in plain English, in simple English, so that, you know, comprehension will be easy. And it did a pretty good job of that. But as far as, you know, really getting into trying to figure out how it helps me with legal work, I'm familiar with Alexi. I use Alexi, and it's been great. Especially for me as a solo, because I get the memo in, and my compulsion is I have to check everything, but which is what we're supposed to be doing anyway. But I'm trying to figure out other ways to leverage it, and I'm curious about other lawyers that are trying to incorporate it into their business model. But I'm kind of spinning my wheels a little bit because I don't know how else. And what I find myself doing is, you know, I have stuff that I know, like in my practice area, and I'm like, okay, well, the test for capacity to grant or revoke a POA for property or something, and I'm going to explain it during a phone call. And you know, I could go in and I could find my memo where I wrote out the test or anything, but you know, when I'm talking on the phone, I pull up the AI and I just say, you know, give me the summary of the test, and then I look at it and I'm like, yeah, it's all that I do. So I'm like, yeah, that's the test. And then I sort of riff off of what it's given me to give the client a general statement about what they're going to be facing. But you know, as far as the ability to really leverage it or utilize it, I'm still sort of spinning my wheels as to how can I guess I'm disappointed. Like it hasn't delivered.
Well, it's been overpromised. And this may be the good example of how generative AI is not going to put you out of business because it's not doing everything for you. One thing that a lot of people who are more experts than I on this, both in law and out, basically say, give it the work you don't want to do. Give it like the junk work, the grunt work. Think about, you know, tasks you have to do. Since you're a solo, you know, you're running a business. Maybe there's stuff totally, you know, administrative stuff that you can be dumping on it. You can be like, you know, I mean, who knows where it's going to go? It's just building, but you get to the point where you can like dump a pile of receipts somehow onto it and just say, yeah, figure all that out for me, and things like that. I don't know. You're probably closer to it than I am.
I think your experience is probably the common experience that people are having, saying, okay, I am ready to try this. I want to use it, but like it doesn't fit with the process. I used the analogy with somebody earlier today. Like imagine if you've never seen a desk, like a physical desk, and somebody brings a desk into your office, and you say, well, I've been carrying on my work hunched up against the wall with the laptop on my knees, and I got a pretty good flow going on doing this. I can't be getting up and walking over to the desk every 5 minutes to do something on the desk and go back. It's, if there's no there for you yet right now that where you can justify changing your behavior, that's fine. But something will appear, whether it's a business practice or something else, something that either you discover through using some of these open-ended tools, or somebody else who's monitoring the industry that you work in and the practice you work in, they create sort of that overlay that systematizes. They don't get there. Like, I know the guy who does Law Droid, and that's what he's trying to figure out. He's trying to figure out what are the common repeatable things that different legal groups work to give you a reason to get up and go sit on the desk. Desks are great. But like, if you say that I'm going to only use the desk a little bit here and there, that's, I mean, my view about AI. Like, we can talk about specific programs and specific opportunities, but like, big picture, my analogies are rain, desk. We don't know, the people who figured out what the desk is for them, they're doing great. They're moving on.
And as I'm trying to give equal time to both of our speakers,
Actually,
Art, you've got 30 seconds.
Well, yeah, I'll give you, there was a gentleman speaking at the Family Law Forum. His name's Samuel. I don't know why. He runs Open Justice out of Queens. And he had a really good analogy saying, when you go to a restaurant with chefs, think of lawyers as chefs, every restaurant's got a microwave oven in it. Almost never are you going to have something that they're going to throw into the microwave and then immediately put it on the table. He said microwaves are really good at heating anything. They're not particularly good at heating everything. They're not particularly good at heating anything. So think of it as we need it sometimes, but it's not the magic bullet. It's not the magic wand.
That's the sous vide.
So actually, that's sous vide. Yeah.
Sous vide is good at everything.
So there you have it, folks. AI, a lot of promise, but it's not a panacea. Thank you very much to our distinguished speakers for final breakout session. Very interesting.